Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. The commanding officer probably knew the guy and knew he was trying to relive days when people cared what he thought. Guy sounds like he was trying to act like he was more than he was. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. You get what you ask for. I was working as a bartender in a military mess in Canada that offered a lot of different beers. A retired military, let's call him Officer Karen, got invited to an event, and when he came to order his beer, he only said, "Bring me a beer." I explained that we offered different kind of brands of beers, but before I could start to list them, he cut me off and started to lecture me about his time in Europe, where bars sell their own homemade beer, and that you only had to ask for a beer and you get one. I told him it was all fine, but I didn't have time to brew a batch of beer for him at that time, so he'd have to choose from the selections we had. He was probably just trying to live the good old days when he could take advantage of low-ranking soldiers. He was an officer before retiring, and I was only a corporal, so he started to give me crap because I was not giving him what he wanted. While he was yelling at me to bring him a beer, I started to think about what kind would satisfy him most. We had some imported brands that would have been perfect if only he'd listened to the list I was giving him. We kept local brands in a locker waiting to be put in the refrigerator, so I decided to bring him a warm Coors Light. I could have brought him a non-alcoholic beer, but I'm not a monster. I don't know if you've ever pissed off a military officer, but let me tell you, it's a sight to see. I started to think I made a mistake since all my superiors were in this room, so they would probably take Officer Karen's side and take revenge on me somehow in the future. But as the Officer Karen was about to grab the beer, to throw it at me, I guess, the commanding officer of the base calmly said, "Well, you asked for any beer, and it is a beer." Officer Karen only drank one beer with us that night. And our second story. Woman rudely demands that I change my clean gloves. So this story's pretty simple, and it happened at my work. We're an assembly line type food place, like Subway, and we get a lot of customers coming down the line some evenings. For some backstory, of course, as we serve food during COVID times, we've been drilled about our cleanliness. We change our gloves as often as we possibly can and wash our hands in between glove changes. We actually are still getting the lectures for it and likely will continue to. It was an evening night and an older couple came in. I watched them arrive through the door, so I was standing and waiting to greet them immediately. But my cheery, "Hi, how are you guys?" was ignored. That's fine though, happens all the time. So I begin to take their order. The lady looks at me and the first and only thing out of her mouth was loudly, "Shouldn't you change your gloves?" Now it doesn't translate to text well, but the amount of force and attitude literally had me taken aback for a second. It was a bit humiliating to basically be accused of being unsanitary, even when I had just changed my gloves. Also in front of my manager and other coworkers. But of course, the customer was always right, so I turned around to go wash my hands and change gloves while flushed tomato red. I was pissed at her rudeness though, so I decided to do her a favor and follow our full protocol. I used plenty of soap, scrubbed for 20 seconds, rinsed under hot water, and used paper towels just to turn off the sink. It was an entire ordeal, and she had front row seats with a nasty look on her face. Unfortunately for her, during the minute I spent washing my hands and putting on gloves, two separate coworkers came to help and finished making her food. I'm sure their gloves were clean, but she doesn't know that, and she looked livid. Looks at me, looks at the coworkers, looks at her food, all with pure rage, while I'm trying to hold in the laughter and glee of the rude woman getting effed over. She didn't even bother mentioning it to the other employees, and then I had the glory of ringing her up and taking her money. I was sure I was going to get a Karen rage fit, but I guess she got knocked down a few pegs because by the time she got to the register, she just seemed really embarrassed. I understood her outlook, but there's really no reason to speak to food service employees like we're the scum of the earth. And maybe just ask if we have fresh gloves instead of assuming we're all gross. Edit. Gonna throw out there that she paid with a card. I didn't actually physically touch her cash and never even got to handle her food. LOL. And our last story. Landlord let cleaners into my condo without consent, $1,700 worth of property stolen. So I just moved from one rental condo to another here in Toronto. I have the original condo until March 31st. Since I had both units for a whole month, I'd left some things behind to move over at my leisure. Earlier this week, my property manager confirmed with me he would be doing his inspection on March 31st, tomorrow. I agreed and told him I would go leave the keys at the concierge for him to pick up on the 30th, and that I had a few items there I was still dealing with. Today is the 30th, and I went to collect the last of my belongings and drop off the keys. They're gone, and there are a bunch of cleaning supplies there. No cleaning has been done. I called the property manager and asked where my stuff is and why there's cleaning stuff in the condo. I did not give consent for anybody to enter prior to the 31st. He says he'll call the cleaners and call back. He calls back 15 minutes later and says there was a scheduling error on the cleaner's part. They accidentally thought your items were garbage and threw them away. Naturally, I lost my crap. He kept putting it on the cleaners, and I insisted he was at fault for providing access to my condo without consent to a person who stole from me. He facilitated theft, in my opinion. Anyway, it's an actual property management company and not just one person. I don't trust at all to repay me the $1,700 for my stolen items. I sent them a list, and he said he would review it with their team tomorrow morning and respond immediately. I'm going to call the tenant board in the morning, and I'm not sure if I should file a police report tonight or wait to see what happens tomorrow. Update. I sought counsel here in town. I saw a paralegal that was supposedly in this area of law, referred to through the Law Society. What an enormous waste of time. After I explained the entire situation to the paralegal and how I didn't know if I should go after the property manager at the tenant board or the cleaner in small claims, or both in small claims, the guy basically despondently nodded and said, "Yeah, that's a real tough one. What do you want to do?" It was frustrating that a legal professional in Toronto couldn't give me any better direction than Reddit. I left no wiser than I arrived and decided to just go through the process with the LTB and feel it out. It didn't feel worth my time or money to seek additional counsel. There was a preliminary hearing at the LTB in April where the property manager and I were each allowed to give our version of events, attempt mediation, and then the board member would determine if the case would go to a formal hearing. After telling my side of things, the property manager didn't dispute any of the events. The board member said that the cleaner was an agent of the landlord and advised the property manager they would be required to pay any damages to me that may be awarded. This was very good to hear, as it finally confirmed I was correct to go after the property manager and not the cleaner. The property manager was cooperative and was pleasant enough to deal with. The board member asked us if we would attempt a settlement. So far, the cleaner had offered $600. The PM said they'd add $400 to that for a total of $1,000. I said I would not take less than the full value of my items listed because I was confident I could prove their value beyond what they offered at a hearing. No settlement was agreed on. That was unsurprising and made sense to me, even though the PM was not contesting the events and was likely going to be ruled against in a formal hearing. It was in their interest to make me prove the value of my stuff and get an order from the board for that amount. Then they could use the order to sue the cleaner later. If they settled, it could be difficult to get the money from the cleaner. At the end of the preliminary hearing, the board member took down a statement of agreed facts to expedite our next hearing since we didn't disagree on any of it. I'm not going to list them, but the gist of it is that they gave their copy of the key to my apartment to a third party without my consent, and they removed my belongings from my apartment. It was very clear they weren't fighting me on that. The formal public hearing where the board would determine damages was a couple of months later. I had receipts, mostly PayPal confirmation emails, for about $1,200 worth of my things that were taken. Then I had $400 worth of stuff where I had pictures of me wearing it with identifying brand markings and stuff showing with printouts from websites where it could be purchased to show the monetary value. Then about $200 worth of stuff where all I had was pictures because they were irreplaceable items that I paid cash for. I had my girlfriend as a witness to what was taken and to confirm the brands of clothing items. The full value of the items was over $1,800. I was expecting to be awarded $1,200 at least for the items I could prove exactly how much I paid for, which is why I didn't settle for $1,000 but wasn't confident about the rest of it. Before the hearings for the day started, the board member called out our names and said, "Are you sure you can't settle this one with the mediator this morning? I'm looking at the agreed facts here," and he looked over at the landlord and kind of shrugged as if to say the hearing is a formality at this point. Nonetheless, the landlord wouldn't budge on it, so we waited 4 hours until we were called up for our hearing. After we went through all the documents, item by item, the property manager was given the floor. He tried to dispute the items that did not have receipts, specifically a pair of jeans worth over $300. Yes, seriously. The board member said that it's not a criminal case and it's not up to me to prove beyond a reasonable doubt every single item I listed. Reference Maldonado versus MEI 1980. The burden of proof I had to meet for a civil matter like this was met through what I had provided. As the PM elected not to bring any experts, witnesses, etc. that could argue against the values I'd stated, or to say the items I was wearing in the pictures did not match the products in the evidence I produced, he had no reason not to believe me. The board member said he didn't even want to hear from my witness because the evidence I produced was substantial and there was no contest from the property manager beyond, "It's not a receipt." The board member ruled in my favor for the full amount that we discussed for each item at the hearing, and I received the order stating such a week or so later in the mail. On my way out of the hearing, I asked the landlord what they were going to do. He said they had no interest in fighting it and would be getting the cleaner to pay for it. A week or two later, I received the check in the mail from the cleaner. This was a few months ago now. The check cleared and the matter is resolved. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.